In May 1957, the night before Nora Kerr was set apart as a full-time missionary in Hong Kong, she had a dream that she was standing on a busy street and saw a beautiful building. When she went inside, she saw other details too that at the time seemed strange. But when she finally received her own endowment in the Hawaii Temple in 1963, she saw those details again. They were symbols found within the temple, though she had never seen a temple on that Hong Kong evening.
As Nora eventually settled in the U.S., married, and raised a family of 4 children, the temple would continue to be an important part of her life. And nearly 40 years after having a dream of a temple in Hong Kong, she would go to the dedication of a temple on the very spot she dreamt it was. This is Saints Volume 4, the podcast. I'm Tessia Tsai.
And I'm James Perry.
Dreams of a Hong Kong Temple.
When she was a young girl, Nora and her family fled civil unrest in mainland China for Hong Kong in 1949. Her mother had died when she was a baby, and her father had died before she was 10. She, her stepmother, and 3 half-sisters found refuge with extended family in Hong Kong. On their first Sunday in their new home, they took a walk and came upon a meeting being held by missionaries from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Nora spoke a dialect of Mandarin and didn't understand the English or the Cantonese the missionaries were speaking. But she felt a powerful warmth and calm from the Spirit and wanted to learn more. Her stepmother wanted the children to learn English, so she instructed Nora to take the children to the mission home each morning. The language was difficult, but she prayed that she could understand it and the teachings of the gospel. Gradually, she began to understand more. Her spoken English would improve throughout her life, although decades later, as a temple worker, she would still feel anxious about getting all the words right.
In late 1950, missionaries asked Nora and 2 of her sisters if they wished to get baptized. Enthusiastically, they said yes. Because there were no baptismal fonts or similar facilities, the missionaries decided to use a nearby river instead. So, on the last day of 1950, Nora and then her sisters became the first members of the church baptized in the Hong Kong mission. A few weeks later, missionaries baptized 15 more people, including Nora's aunt. Just weeks after that, however, war broke out in Korea and missionaries were abruptly taken out of Hong Kong.
The 18 members of the church were left with just 1 copy of the Book of Mormon to study. No sacrament, no building, no meetings. For part of this time, Nora worked as an usherette at the Broadway Theater, and when American servicemen would come, she would ask them if they were members of the church. If they were, she would ask them to come to a meeting and administer the sacrament for the members. In 1954, with the Korean War now over, Elder Harold B. Lee visited Hong Kong, and Nora, prompted by the Spirit, begged him to send the church back to Hong Kong. You can read more about that and more about Nora's eventual church service in Volume 4 of Saints. But in 1955, missionaries returned to the city, led by President Grant Heaton, who had been a missionary in Hong Kong prior to the war.
In May 1957, President Heaton called Nora as a missionary. That was when she had her dream. The temple was a fulfillment of a prophetic promise. In the 1980s, Elder Gordon B. Hinckley promised members that if they would keep the commandments, they would have a temple of their own. Initially, she didn't anticipate going to the dedication herself, as such a trip would be extremely expensive for the family.
Their children, including their daughter Lorene and son Arthur, remember
before her mission, she had that dream about going to somewhere that looked like a temple, but she didn't know what it looked like. And so she always had that memory in her mind. And coming back after my mission, Elder Hinckley at the time, he had spoken in a multi-state conference in Hong Kong, and he promised the members 10 years before, if they were faithful, if they paid their tithing, if they served, and really worked to stay close to the gospel and build their testimonies, that one day there might be a temple in Hong Kong, and everybody was praying for it, preparing for that. And Mom knew that too. That was something that was really important to her. It came, it's like, can you believe it? Can you believe it? can we really go? I remember talking to her and Dad behind the scenes. We were saving money so that we could be able to do that.
Mom was telling Dad, no, it's too expensive, but I think you could tell she was very pleased that he said we're going, and she was very excited.
Oh, it's like a dream come true. The fruits of all the labors of the members and showing the gospel and that the Lord really does love all of his children.
In May 1996, Nora, Raymond, and their 4 children flew from San Francisco east to Hong Kong. Lorene had served a mission to Hong Kong, and Daniel had visited the city, but Nora's other children had never been to the place where their mother had found the gospel and helped teach it to others. For Nora, it was her first time back since leaving in 1963. Though the whole family was excited for the event, Corrine remembers her mother being the most excited of all.
I don't think she slept on the plane. I think she was just excited. And the food was pretty good on the plane. I missed meals, but she had everyone and the warm towels. But I remember when we got off and the doors in Hong Kong airport opened up, there's this blast of warm air. And Mom was just like, welcome to Hong Kong.
From there, Nora took the family down memory lane, sometimes literally, in the case of streets where she'd lived. The mission home had been raised to make room for the temple, and Nora was pleased that the place she had felt was sacred as a missionary was now a sacred space for members around the world. Nora had always been ashamed of her continuing difficulty in reading English, and how that limited her ability to read stories to her children, like she wanted to. But she could tell them stories, so through their growing up years, their bedtimes were often filled with tales of faith and perseverance in a far-off land. Her son, Daniel, remembers that for the family, seeing these sights was an introduction to the world they had only known through Nora's stories of her younger years.
We went to a lot of places that she had visited before, like Nathan Road and Prince Road, and she was just so happy to show us and to tell us about these things and finally to put the place with the actual stories that she had told us throughout our life. And being able to say, wow, this is where it happened.
The introductions included people, too. Missionaries throughout the years, including many Nora knew, gathered for the dedication and held their own gatherings and testimony meetings. As Nora met more and more people she had known decades before, Arthur remembers, her family started seeing a side of her they hadn't realized was there.
It was a wow moment for me because I thought we were just going to the dedication just because that was the thing to do. And we were in that big member missionary gathering and it was kind of crowded and we were late. I was, hurry up, kids, hurry up. We got to go. We're going to be late. And we walk in and everybody's already mingling. And then they hushed. When Mom walked in, they all parted ways. They just parted the way for her to walk down. They were all quiet. It was noisy to quiet. And we were just walking there. And then one missionary comes out. He was a current missionary serving there. And he shook her hand. He said, I always wanted to meet the Joseph Smith of China. That's what they called her, I was like, wow. What did he just say? That was my big recollection is I didn't realize what an impact she had over there that they continue to remember. And then every missionary reunion thereafter that we went to, she was always recognized by everybody. That I understood why they were doing that. I don't know which missionary came up, but he said, what impact your mother had on us is she taught us how to be missionaries. She taught us how to convert.
During these gatherings, Nora met one of the missionaries who had taught her and her sisters 40 years before. Elder Harold Smith had thought that his short time in Hong Kong had had little, if any, impact.
He, just from a small town in Duluth, Minnesota, was the companion with President Heaton and left. And after he left, he went back and he never thought his mission amounted to much. So he came back to this reunion and he tapped Mom on the shoulder and said, do you remember me? And Mom turns around and she looks at him. Well, and all of a sudden, that recognition. And she's like, Elder Smith. And she turned to us. She said, he's the one that was there at the beginning. And Elder Smith is just crying because he's like, I didn't think I made a difference. He had no idea that she stayed active. She got married in the temple and had kids and we also have missions. And he was just crying because he went home and he thought that all these years he was a failure.
I knew about the Elder Smith story. or he went along feeling like he was a failure. I knew that. So when she introduced himself, I knew exactly who he was. I didn't know what he looked like before. And I think she said he's the one that taught me how to shake hands. You shake hands like a farm grip, like a missionary grip.
And he's a big guy. He's a big farm guy.
So she told us that when he did. So he got up. Everybody was bearing their testimonies. And when he got up, Hal Smith, because when he went home, nobody heard from him. They didn't hear from him. And he didn't come to reunions. He disappeared. Nobody knew where he was. And when he showed up in Hong Kong, then everybody's like, wow, this is Hal Smith. When he went up to bear his testimony, he got out this little rock that he had saved all these years from the baptism, from the actual place where she was baptized. He says, now I present this to you. This is a rock from when you were baptized. Gave it to her.
And she says, I never forgot you. He's like, did you ever remember? He says, I never forgot you. She says, you don't forget people who save you. And just being a savior of life. The Lord saves us. She says, I always remember you. That's what I remember her saying.
Nora, too, bore her testimony at that powerful meeting, as Lauren remembers.
One of the things I remember her saying, my heart is full. She was so filled with joy to see how the small little church, when she was there, to how big it's grown and how many members and wards and stakes. And now the temple was there. And what a blessing was it. That, and she said that she felt like it was coming full circle. She'd always wanted to be in Hong Kong, in the temple with her family, and to be able to bring her family back there after all those years and all the prayers that she had about being married in the temple and raising a righteous family. She was grateful to be able to be there and participate in that dedication. To see my mom smile, her face shone, her eyes lit up. It was such joy.
Nora and her family, along with many of the other missionaries, were given tickets to the English language session of the temple dedication. As Nora toured the temple, her children remember her beaming from ear to ear. And as they sat in the temple for the dedication, her children remember tears of joy streaming down their mother's face.
A lot of huge, big smiles.
I know she cried is when we all stand and sing Spirit of God.
The trip lasted for only a few days, and the family only attended a single dedicatory session of the 7 conducted over 2 days. But the memories from that day and that trip have stayed with the Jew family in the nearly 20 years since. Nora Koop passed away in 2011, and since her death, the memories have become only more sweet.
I think one of the reflections, and this was after we got back, I came back to Arizona and we were just talking. I got pictures developed, and her comment was an experience that she has to be able to see where the church is, how the gospel's grown from her day to what it is now. What it still came down to for her, though, was about the connections and the relationships. It just was so neat to see people, lives changed, and just collectively then as members, kind of what it came down to. And I don't know exactly how she expressed that, but that's how she simplified and boiled it down to, is just these are the connections we make in the temple. And what it all came down to is this life is about, and what makes us happy is the connections that we make and the relationships that we keep.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Saints Volume 4, the podcast. We hope you gain new insight and perspective, and would love to hear your thoughts about this or other stories we've shared here. You can reach us at saintspodcast@churchofjesuschrist.org.